So did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did not. I did not watch the Super Bowl. I'm
What?
hearing some blowback. Yeah, I'm my catchphrase for 2024, which is sadly carrying over into 2025, is surviving, not thriving. So we have a house full of flu-ridden children, and that's what I was doing. I was watching my baby to make sure he was breathing properly yesterday because he was making all kinds of weird noises and like pausing in his breathing. It was great. So you get me like this tonight.
Yep.
What did you think
I
of it?
feel like for as long as I've known you, you're always sick or someone's sick or something's happening.
Life with kids. They're like walking petri dishes.
That's why I just let my kid eat off the floor and stuff because I figure it'll build up his immunity and he'll be fine.
Yeah, I do too. Didn't work. Just made him the weird kid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
For
Yeah,
us, the weird parents.
he's always trying to share with me the stuff that he's picking up off the floor. Yeah, that does make him the weird kid. But I mean, I
Our
always
parents are
partake. I always partake because then now I have a great immune system too.
that gum under the chair, really is a great way to build your immunity. Who needs vaccines when you could eat things other people have touched or off the floor?
Exactly. Exactly. That's the new administration's viewpoint.
Oh my God. I have will say I've developed amazing immunity um from it though, because many, many times in the past two times actually my kids have gotten sick, like I can feel my body fighting it off before it even becomes a thing. So I get like, cold symptoms, but then it never turns into anything else and I get better. So hoping that's what I'm doing right now. I'm hoping it stays that way. Yeah.
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 I don't know. I've been thankful, like if I feel myself getting sick, I get over it pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
I've been
It's
thankful for
good.
that. But
It's
it's
really
always
good.
tough, like people calling off and things and missing work, and it's that always like puts a stress on things. So I know that's something that like a lot of managers have to deal with, and getting your
Yeah.
like having everything be aligned and filling in the gaps, which it's a tough act to balance because you want to give people freedom and autonomy and all that, but at the same time you still have to like keep tabs on things to know, if you have to jump in somewhere like that, if somebody, calls off or can't execute on something because they wake up sick and it's the day of.
Yeah, it's tough. It's kind of that human experience, right? Like, what do you do? Um, my sister's been going through that right now in her new job because we just got back from my brother's wedding and having to be out for 5 days, and then all three of her kids, one after the other, got the vicious flu, including her. And, people are getting annoyed that she's missing work, but it's like, what do you do? You can't really help it, but it's inconvenient, and that's frustrating. So yeah, it's a tough situation, but it's kind of that time of year.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why I don't like PTO policies. That's a whole other topic. That's not today's topic,
yeah.
but maybe that should be a topic.
Could be, customizing PTO policies for what makes sense for your
Yes.
business. A lot of people, and that's kind of like the issue, I always hear a lot of people, they use Gusto, which is a great resource. I mean, we use Gusto for our payroll. But they use like all the HR templates and
Mhm.
that's like a great starting place and it's a great like foundation for things. But at the end of the day, like all of your policies have to be customized. And so, in order to do that, like you really have to understand the culture of your business and the service model of your business to be able to align that PEO policy.
Yeah, and there's so much thought that goes into a policy and so many nuances to consider when enacting a policy and trying to make sure like people are being you can consistently apply the policy, right? Because from a legal standpoint, if it's not something you can consistently apply across the board, it's not really helping you. Um, it's opening up a lot of variability in terms of your compliance. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you just don't know until you don't know what you don't know, right? So until you meet with someone and actually describe what you're trying to achieve, and they can talk you through. We were actually doing that with a client recently. Um, I wanted to move to like a lump award accrual system instead of just like giving everything up front. It's like a quarterly, you get a piece of it each quarter. And there were so many elements of rolling that out that they hadn't even thought of that we had to kind of walk them through and make decisions on. So it is good to, you can start there, but meet with a professional and talk it through. I
Yeah,
digress. Yeah.
it's good to customize things. So,
Yeah.
and I know, especially like leadership, going back to, people calling off and understanding what to do as a leader. When you're creating like an autonomous team, or if you have a team that's not autonomous,
Yeah.
what are like the root causes of that? Is that like a leadership thing, or is it like who you hired?
Mm, I think it's both. I think it's kind of like the chicken and the egg problem, right? Like which one comes first? Um, so hear me out. This is where I'm coming from. Um, if you hire people that are not autonomous, you tend to feel, or like a natural response is to feel like you need to lean in more, control more, because at the end of the day, as a leader, it falls on you, right? If things aren't getting done. So um, that can very easily become something that you like fall into as a pattern of behavior. And then you're not creating standards for people to rise to, and you're not holding the right people accountable. You're kind of like overcompensating and bridging the gap, right? Which means that team's going to continue to operate in a non-autonomous fashion. At the same time, if you have a leader that's doing that, or kind of naturally like has a propensity for micromanagement or controlling, or having feeling like they need to do all the work, um, they're going to subconsciously continue to hire that prototype of person on the team. Or the people that work well with that dynamic are going to stay on the team because they're not required to be autonomous. The manager's compensating for all of it. Um, and the people that are autonomous are going to be driven out of the team because they're not going to function well with someone that is kind of overbearing and overcompensating in that way. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yep.
So what you end up doing is creating like a vicious cycle of like you're either hiring the right people who won't stay because you're falling into this pattern of overcompensating, and it's not allowing them to rise, or you're not holding the right people accountable, and therefore highly autonomous individuals will move on because they get frustrated by team members who are not equally as autonomous, right? So um, it all comes back to, I think, that element of identifying the true issue and then addressing that, those individuals, or the root problem, right? Is the root problem your leadership? Is it your hiring? Is it your lack of accountability of certain team members? But it will kind of keep going around and around, I think, if you don't address all of those.
Yep. Yeah, I think you have to look at each one, isolate each part of it and make small adjustments. Some might be small adjustments, some might be big adjustments, but you have to kind of isolate each one at a time and understand where the biggest problem areas are. I think for hiring, like it's important, like finding a good match and a good synergy for like how a team works together is so important. And so I think a lot of that is like having a leader, like the hiring manager be like the leader of the hiring process, right? And so like you want to have a process in your organization where like things are delegated, but I think at the end of the day, like each hiring manager should really be overseeing, you know, how that process flows for their, to be able to hire people that are going to, work in their team, like you said, in a synergy, what, to be autonomous, to jive with the leader, to have the leader also have the right skills to be able to understand the marketplace, understand the candidates that are in the marketplace and what adjustments they need to make in order to get that top talent. And so I'm just thinking of like, I remember we had a client where they had the hiring managers review the resumes, and like, I don't think that's a good idea, but I do think
Yeah.
that like as a recruiter, so if I was like an internal recruiter at that organization, I think it would be really, really important to spend a lot of time getting to know all of the hiring managers and like getting to know their styles and getting to know the people on their team and getting to know like the goods and the bads and like really really understanding that because like as a recruiter you have to play a little bit of a psychologist, I mean you really have to like understand different personalities and what the expectations are. And
Yeah.
so when I'm thinking of like a hiring manager being, kind of the in control of the process. I'm not thinking that they should be reviewing resumes, but I am thinking that like hiring decisions should be based on their styles in order to have
Hmm.
like an effective team that is going to work well together.
So a couple of things you mentioned there that I want to touch on. One, like I totally agree. If you're an internal recruiter, it is critical to understand and build a relationship with your hiring managers and their teams, right? I actually that was something that I felt like I excelled at particularly and enjoyed the most when I was a corporate recruiter, like an internal recruiter, because they all were really different. Um, and I also agree that they should not be reviewing resumes. Why? Because again, same as like interviewing up front, right? Like a manager's going to have the best idea, to your point, of who's going to gel with their team. Um, and who like they can dive into the really nitty-gritty specifics of what skills, um, hard or soft, are required for that role and if they have them. But recruiters are really skilled, if you're good at what you do, right? And you do it long enough, you're really skilled at parsing through resumes and being able to see what's not there. Um, and I say that not as throwing shade, but there's definitely lazy recruiters, right? There's definitely a ton of recruiters that if the resume doesn't match exactly, word for word, line for line, what they're looking for, they just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think what's really important is being able to see what's not there, right? And like be a little creative in how you're looking at a resume because sometimes the best hires don't look great on paper.
Yeah.
So, like, and I've said that to you before, like, I've gone to LinkedIn pages, and if I'm on the fence with someone, because maybe they don't look as strong on paper, but there's something there that I can't put my finger on, like, I'll go to LinkedIn and look at their recommendations. And if they have all these raving recommendations from people that have worked with them, I'll pass them forward because I'm like, okay, that's to me more of a testament to what they're like in the workplace than, what their resume says. And hiring managers can get in their own way of not being as, skilled or experienced or maybe creative and being able to see those things that are not there. And then they tend to overlook potential talent that a recruiter might find. Same thing as a recruiter is really good at interviewing, right? So they're good at kind of parsing through the BS, um, up front and just filtering through the people that are legit for the hiring manager cherry pick. But then it comes down to like, what if you have a hiring manager that's a micromanager? That's just continually like, what if they're the problem and they're continually picking people that are not going to be autonomous because they don't know how to let go? Then what happens when they're in charge of the recruiting process?
Well, I more so mean that, so I think I'm thinking of two things in like the what we do for workplaces.
Hmm.
So, and that's like kind of our mission, right? Our mission is to create amazing workplaces, one business at a time. And I get really excited thinking about like the people that we can help do that because I think that is a gap. Like that's a common challenge that people are facing is like the hiring manager is in charge, but they don't necessarily have like the skills or the self-awareness to make the right decision. What I was more referring to of like the hiring manager should kind of be in control of the process is when they're given the right skills and they're given the right development in order to make those good decisions. So it's like just because they're a micromanager, that's not always a bad thing, right? But to your point, like you can't be hiring autonomous people if that's the case. So like understanding your target candidate persona and your candidate profile and like identifying, like going back, sitting with a hiring manager and going back to what made a good hire, what made a bad hire, like and thinking back all the way to the first step, right, to that person's resume. So that way they can understand going forward from step one.
Yeah.
So that's more what I was thinking is like the hiring manager should be heavily involved, but you should also make sure that they have the tools to make the right decisions. You can't just like let them loose, with their own devices.
Yeah, well, I think that that's where recruiters, just like HR, like there's people that are okay, there are people that are not so great, there's people that are great, right? But like great recruiters, great HR can be partners in that way. There's space for them to lean into that more. And I think especially like people young in their career get hesitant to cross that line of like, how do I address the elephant in the room? How do I advise? How do I kind of help them get out of their own way? Um, and it's very challenging sometimes. Sometimes it's more challenging as an internal recruiter because you have to work with them every day, right? Sometimes it's less challenging because you get to work with them every day, so you build more of that trust and rapport. But that's definitely like, a challenge and a benefit of being external is like one, we have more of an objective perspective. We can kind of see things playing out from a 10,000 foot view. Um, Sometimes it's harder to get people to listen because you are external. So uh, you have less time to kind of build that trust and rapport. That's where I really like when we get to work with people over time, like clients have been with us for 3 years, 4 years, right? Like we've built that trust. Um, but it's it's really important for recruiters, for HR, like to cross that barrier, I think, and provide that consultative approach of, hey, here's what I see happening. Right. Like you said, like what is your ideal candidate? Okay, well, let's look back at the people you've hired, who's worked out, who's not worked out. Let's be really honest with each other about maybe why. So for example, if you end up accusing everyone of not working out, well, I need to be able to share that pattern of behavior with you. And that's really hard to do, right? Like, okay, well, we've gone through, 7 people that have left your team over the last 5 years, and every single one you've told me it's their fault. So, like, what's a different way we can look at that? What are some things that maybe you could be doing to contribute to that? Right. And like, how do you tactfully have those conversations and be more consultative? And I think that's where unfortunately either people get scared or recruiters and HR don't. They do a disservice to our line of work because they're unwilling to cross that barrier and have those tough conversations that can really change the way we solve the real problem, right? The root of the problem versus just continuing to put a band-aid over it and tiptoe around what's actually going on.
Yeah. And that's really tough too, as a recruiter, is typically in most structures, like a recruiter is a subordinate to a hiring manager, and so like having to manage up. And so I think a lot of what we run into is like recruiters are in a tough position and like challenged to be able to be like honest with hiring managers, to coach them through that. So, but that's
Yeah.
all, those are tools that we provide for how to say things, tonality of things, questions to ask where you lead people, to that conversation. So, but it is a
Yeah.
tough position. All that to say, I recognize it's a tough position to be in.
It is. It's a well, you can look at it two ways, right? Because it is a tough position to be in. I've been in it, so I get that. Um, it's also a challenge you can rise to, like a great learning experience, right? Because when I started in that position, I was bottom of the totem pole. Um, and not only did I have to get managers to listen to me, I also had to run a committee of almost 40 people um, that supported the whole recruitment process, for tons of roles at a time all year long, in and out, because we had a very, very tiny team. So we relied on like these employees, these managers to be trained and to help support the process. I had to get them to listen to me, and I had literally no authority over them, right? Beyond them volunteering to work on this committee and be part of the process. So it was, I will constantly tie it back to like that being the most incredible learning experience of managing up. And the one thing I can say helped me do that, that if anyone is in this position and listening, um, would be key is like building a relationship and building trust. Because I spent the time intentionally building a relationship with all of the leaders that I had to work with, right? And then through those conversations and through time and exposure, I was able to build trust by showing them that I knew what I was talking about and I had their best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And that when I said something, I meant it not to be, you know, challenging or difficult, but like, hey, I want to deliver for you, right? And to do that, like, we have to be able to do XYZ. So when you have trust and a relationship built, it doesn't really matter what position you're in. People are more likely to listen. There's always a few that won't, right? Like I can still remember the particular person that constantly went rogue. Like no matter what I did, no matter how many times I got everyone else to follow the process, this person did their own damn thing. And it's like, it is what it is.
And I'm sure that's like part of who they are, which,
Yeah,
a lot of
totally.
people can like agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked for him. It didn't work for me because he was the one person I couldn't hold accountable, to follow the process, but it worked. And so, like, I had the respect of understanding that his team loved him. And for the most part, he made good hiring decisions. And for the most part, the team, you know, was solid performers and that he would get rid of people that were not. So it worked for him. And even though he didn't do it my way, like, I kind of just let him do his thing because it was working. So it is what it is, right? Everything's a give and take. But yeah, it's that's definitely a unique challenge of being in a position where you have to control people that you have no actual control over. And I think that is where true leadership forms. We were talking about that today, right? Like shame, I was saying shame is um, a feeble attempt at controlling people that you realize you have no control over.
Mhm.
And true leadership is not having to resort to shame. It's like genuinely changing hearts and minds and gaining trust and winning people over. It's not, let me see how I can force them to do what I want them to do through negative means because I can't actually get them to do what I want them to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. A journey of, finding tools to engage and motivate people, without, the traditional tactics that, that we've always seen like just don't usually work. But they don't have a lasting impact.
Right. It's short lived. It's not lasting, right? You're not actually winning people to your side. You're basically forcing their hand. Um, and that's what I really enjoyed about it's old school, but it's tried and true. Like John C. Maxwell's levels of leadership, he talks about positional leadership as the first level, right? I have to listen to you because I have to listen to you. You have power over me in some way. And what we're talking about is even like resorting to things when you don't have power over someone. right? But even when you do have power over someone, that is the lowest level of leadership because you're not actually getting someone to do something because they want to do it for you. And therefore, you're not going to get the best out of them. You're going to get begrudging and forced compliance. And maybe that's what you're going for, but I hope not because, like you said, it's not lasting.
Yeah.
Um, and they're not going to feel good about it. So they're not going to comply very long. And that, I think that's what we see about this generational shift too. Like the boomers are leaving the workforce and the millennials are making up a huge part of the remaining workforce, and Gen X, Gen Z, like we're progressively as a generation becoming more independent thinkers and more um, free spirited, I guess. Right? Like in that we don't have the same tie to the company that the boomers did, or even people before. But that's also because the company doesn't have the same tie to us, right? They're not offering pensions anymore. They're not offering things that make it viable for us to stick around and spend our whole career somewhere. They're not treating us like family. They're treating us, most companies treat people like they're expendable. So people are treating companies like they're expendable. So with that position of leadership, you're not going to get very far. And that could be a whole other podcast topic. And maybe it should be
Yeah.
because that is, you know,
Yeah, there's definitely a lot shifted in how people engage with their job. And
yeah,
companies, to their own fault, but it's totally normal. They chase trends, you know what I mean? Because we're figuring out these new things, we're trying to figure out what to do with it and how to solve it. And so a lot of companies chase trends, and with, the employee engagement thing, it's like they're doing things that don't they have these like short-term impacts instead of like a lasting impact. So I'm thinking of like it's great to have, a great workplace or great office space and to do fun events and do all these things, but where pretty much most companies miss the mark is like having tools and strategies that engage the worker with their actual job. You know what I
right.
mean? Like you can engage the worker with like having a good leader and having a, ping pong table and having good events and all these other things, but like they don't really put a lot of time and thought into like how can I engage them in their specific job so that they're interested and active and show up
Right.
every day like passionate about it. And a lot of that comes down to like whole reason I was thinking of this is because you were talking about the difference in generations and like now what we're seeing is like people like if a job doesn't make sense they don't want to do it,
Right.
and so I mean I'm just thinking about in public accounting, people were working these long crazy hours through all these various busy seasons, and now I mean there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of new firms of, it started out as a solopreneur that didn't want to do that. And then they start to grow and they add employees. And then when they add those employees, they're like, we don't work busy season hours here. We work a normal schedule. And it's like, so like that's like a way of like, okay, so people don't want to do this crazy thing for the job. So let's get rid of it. Let's meet people at where they want to work.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. I mean, we always tie things back to like relationships, right? Because it's something everyone can um, connect with and understand. And there really is so many similarities between what we do and parallels with relationships because we're talking about people, right? It all comes down to human connection, human interaction. It's the same. So when you talk about that, like tying to the job, and short-term fixes, it's like it's parallel to how we view relationships in general. And, old school, let's talk about marriage, right? Like old school marriage is like you could be in a horrible marriage and you'd be sticking it out because that's what society expected of you. It's like you just suck it up. You've committed to that person and like you're stuck in it till they did or you did, right? Like That's just what it was. And you know, and things have evolved and changed to realize like why are we doing that to ourselves? Like why are we suffering if we're miserable? We have one life. And so people are becoming empowered to find things that truly make them happy and engaged and give to their life while they're also giving to the company or the relationship. And so, any relationship, if you're in with someone and you like feel kind of mediocre about them, any relationship can withstand, all the best times, right? Like things are going great, things are so easy, you're making good money, everyone has their health, things are fun, things are light, right? But when if you're truly connected to that person is if you can withstand all the hard things, right? When you have very little or you have nothing except each other and you're going through it. And like when you're genuinely connected to that person, you don't need all those extra things, right? You can make it through those highs and those low lows because you have each other and you have a genuine connection and partnership and trust. But, the minute that you don't have that, you're hitting those low lows, like most people dip. They're like, you know what, this actually isn't for me. Like it's not fun anymore. And I'm not that connected to this person. So I'm gonna go find something better, and it's the same at work. So are they truly connected to you? Are they truly connected to your mission? Are they truly connected to the work? Right. Um, and it doesn't have to be constant. You can go through seasons, but at the end of the day, like you said, it's the extraneous stuff is nice to have, but that's not the glue that holds people to their job.
Yeah.
So
Yep. And it's a leader's responsibility to kind of cultivate that within their team. And it's an organization's responsibility to set the tone for what is acceptable and what the expectations are within, within that umbrella. So I think if you want an autonomous team, you have to align how you're hiring with who the leader is, with what the company is.
yeah,
And
and
it's not as
cultivate it
easy as
ongoing.
that.
So easy. It's actually quite hard, but
Yep.
that's what we're here for.
Yep, that's right. There's many steps to it, and we know all of them.
Yeah. Oh man, it's late on a Monday night.
Yep. Well, I hope your
You.
household feels better.
Thanks.
Everyone's back to health and um, words of wisdom.
That was that late night blank stare. Wait, where did my brain go?
Yeah.
I don't. It's just
Something,
went offline.
something, something.
Processing, processing. But like your loading screen.
Yeah.
I totally recognize that stare. I'm right there with you.
All right, let's get out of here.
Let's do it.
Bye.
Bye.